Okay, I'm in the process of reworking a 20 shaft Macomber Air-Assist Dobie, and the way it was originally laid out, the valves were all in series with a common high pressure line, and I've actually already done about 15 of these valves. The rest of them are sitting here. The first thing I noticed, these are the valves themselves from the other view. 14 of them were 24 volt, 6 of them were 12 volt. So I suspect somebody's done some rework and it's not, and a handful of them weren't marked at all. So I have no idea. Now the first thing I want to know is I'm going to, just to figure out electrically whether the valve's working at all. Let me take one of the 24s that I know is working. And I'm looking at the resistance on it. And when I measure resistance, it's about 1.2 kilo ohms. If I look at the 12 volt, it's going to be about 300 ohms. So that becomes a way where I can actually tell the two apart. But now what I want to do is take one of the unknown valves here, and I check the resistance on it. So that tells me it's a good 24 volt valve, which is what that's showing me. Now, when I'm done with this, what I'm actually going to do is mount them onto a plate this way, so that I can take the Dobie head off and do some independent work on it and not have to crawl on the floor into the loom. So the first thing I want to do, take off the mounting brackets, so I'm not really going to need those at all. I'm going to put all those parts in a different bag over here so I can keep track of what's where. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is take the hose off here. This one twists off pretty easily. And I want to be a little bit careful to make sure I don't lose the gaskets. I'm just going to pull the gasket loose with my fingernail. I'm going to put that into a separate bag with the gasket so they don't get lost. Now, the other thing that I will probably reuse is the red slip ring here. So I'm actually going to slide that back down. Now, the rest of the red tube is old enough and dilapidated that it's not really worth worrying about. So I'm just going to kind of grab it with a pair of cutters and peel it out and just throw that guy away. I'm going to take a wrench. A little bit harder to get torque on this, so they'll pull that guy off. And again, this one typically comes loose with the little gasket on it. And on those parts I might end up reusing, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful with those, keep that out there. Now, I've got the valve. And the first thing I'm going to do is take off the cap of it here. And I'm going to put that down on the bench so I can clean it up in a minute. So now I've got the valve I'm ready to do some work on. The first part of it, there's a seam here, which when I take, I'm also going to replace the wiring, so I'll unsolder those guys later. A little Allen wrench. Loosen one side, loosen the other side. So the guys are both loose now. It's pretty stiff. It doesn't want to come loose. I'm just going to take a screwdriver handle, tap it a little bit. Now the bottom part of the valve, here's the gasket. I want to be a little bit careful. What I'm going to do is put the rest of the valve into alcohol to clean it. I'm going to take the gaskets. I don't want the alcohol to eat those, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful with those. Now, I've got the two long screws that come through from the top. Just putting those away. And there's what the inside looks like. Going to take, be real careful with this one. I'm using a brand new Phillips screwdriver here, just so I don't strip the heads and I can get it nice and tight. Because when I'm done, there's going to be a fair amount of pressure on this. Okay, this is the part where you need to be a little bit careful. These are Humphrey's 3E1 valves, and as it turns out, Humphrey is still making them. They're available on their website one way or another. They're about $30 to $40, depending upon voltage and so forth. So if you do make a mistake, it's not an insurmountable mistake. Now, I also view it as any part I lose as a $30 part because it turns a valve into trash. So I can now see, here's the solenoid and the spring underneath it. Lost one of those springs and destroyed a valve a while ago, so I'm much more careful now. Now, next thing I'm going to do is take the O-ring out, another piece of rubber, so I don't want the alcohol to hurt it. So I've now got all the different pieces of the valves ready to play with. I'm actually going to put those in alcohol. I've got 2 more valves in here already. I'm going to lay the body in. It's waterproof, so it shouldn't be a problem. The alcohol will dry out pretty quickly and easy. So I'm going to put all the metal parts. Be a little bit careful you don't get the alcohol. A, it's flammable, and B, you really don't want to get it in your eyes. I'm trying to be careful not to get it in my hands. I'm going to put it in there. So I've got those guys. That's now started ultrasound cleaning on the valves. So in the meantime, move the next 2 I've got to do here out of the way. I'm going to take all of the gaskets and the rubber gaskets. This is basically a little bubble solution with a little bit of detergent in it to get rid of the grease and oil on it. Just kind of wiping those off with my fingers and then putting them into a pan of water to just let them dry out. So I'll get rid of the soapy water. So I've now got these guys sitting in water. A piece of paper towel. I'm just going to take those guys back out. Put them on the paper towel to dry out. So now I'm ready. Basically, as soon as the valves are coming, as soon as they're done in the ultrasound, should be ready to reassemble. And I'm going to edit out a few minutes of dead time since you don't need to watch the ultrasound run. Okay, the ultrasound is now done. So I'm going to grab it and start cleaning parts. You'll notice when I put these in here, I did keep all the pieces for each valve together. These are a standard production valve, so I would expect they would pretty much be all the same. But just in case they're for different production lots, I'd rather not find out the hard way. The pieces don't match. So I took a piece of paper towel, wiped off the outside of it. I'm using a Q-tip to clean out the inside, just to get as much of the alcohol off as I can. Now what I'm going to do is take just a drop of machine oil into the solenoid rounds. Now, okay, now I've got the plunger and the spring, being real careful not to lose too many pieces here. So the problem I've had, it turns out all of the valves I'm playing with here are functional and not in bad shape. Last time I did this, I had several where the lubrication had solidified and the valves wouldn't open, but the coils still worked. So by cleaning out all the crap, now the rams were working better. So now what I'm going to need is the O-ring base. Let's dry that off a bit. Put the O-ring back into it. So now I am ready to reassemble this guy. And this one doesn't have any particular orientation. I just need to be careful to get the right holes in the right places. Okay, so I've got the pieces I'm going to need back out of the bath. Put the screws back in. So this is the part I need to be a little bit careful when I'm done. There's going to be a fair amount of pressure on these guys. And when I first started doing these, I hadn't tightened this down far enough when I put the thing together. I've suddenly got a leak and I'm drawing air around the edges. So I'm now going to get a good grip on it with a good clean screwdriver. Like I say, this one's brand new. Tighten that down. So it's more than, it's snug, but I don't want to get tight enough I'm going to strip anything. Now I've got the guide tabs on the sides, got the clean gasket. Lay the gasket over the top. And deal with the, so I'm going to put the seal cover back on. Now, the electrical contacts are on the same side without. That's the inside, the out edge. I'm going to line that guy up there. Throw the screws back in. Take my Allen wrench. Snug that up. Again, pretty tight because it's going to be pushing some pressure on that guy. Wipe the pieces off. And I should now have a good clean valve. Next thing I'm going to do is just unsolder the wires so I can put the new contacts on. And then I'm ready to start putting the pieces back on. While I'm at it, let me go do another couple of these guys. Oil. So I'm trying to keep the original parts of these things together. I'm not as worried about the metal parts because they're going to be a little bit more standard than I'm afraid the plastics could be. Okay, so I've got the spring, the plunger, the coil. Drop that in. I've got the base, the O-ring. Dry that off a little bit. Don't want the alcohol to get to the O-rings more than I need to. And the little holes line up, and I still don't have my screws. Say tight, but not too tight, and I really don't want to strip the screw heads. So I'm lining the alignment poles up, out towards the contacts. There they are, so it goes on that way. I need my two long screws again. That gives me the second one. I've got the valve cap on the third. So that's two more ready to go.